afternoon, everyone. I wanted to echo Eleanor's comments around thanking our partners, and for you all to take the time out during your busy schedules to join us for the Motor Festival. It's been an incredible experience for us, and I've genuinely been bowled over by what a fantastic job the team at ILC has done to make this event happen, where ordinarily we'd be together in Coventry. The weekly webinars that they've hosted every week in both the home and motor sectors since the pandemic began have been a real highlight of these unprecedented times for me. We've even grown our partner base during the time. Eleanor mentioned all of our corporate partners, but I was delighted to see and announce Zurich Insurance as our latest insurer partner, Copart as our latest corporate partner, and as I say, our figures and the LinkedIn community have never been bigger. I'm really looking forward to this session. I've had the privilege and benefit of spending some time with Greg and Mobileye before, and I'm sure, like me, this will give you some great insights in terms of your day job. It's our penultimate session, as Eleanor mentioned, of our first ever digital festival, and it's not too late to register for tomorrow's final session. Again, Stuart, I've spent a lot of time with. I'm a huge fan of. He's been a regular speaker at our events, the CEO of All Things Positive and founder of Live Big. I can't stress to you enough that his session about positive mindset will help you be better tomorrow through what you learned today, and that you should share it with your employees. They'll really appreciate it, and we really do need to make sure that we're supporting people from a mental health and wellbeing perspective in these challenging times. Like Eleanor, I'm really looking forward to seeing you all again face to face. But in the meantime, let's introduce our keynote speaker. I've described this session as the best kept secret in automotive. Greg Weingarten from Mobileye will share with us some of the mind-blowing developments around the all-important vehicle technology and how that will help shape the future landscape. We don't normally recommend people speak about their businesses, but I've asked Greg specifically to do that, as he's not trying to sell anything to us today, and it really does help set the scene. So, final reminder, please use the Q&A section of the website for any questions. I'll keep my eye on those. We'll do the best we can to get them covered in this session, or if not, as we've pledged with all the events to now, we'll follow up with you post-event. So, hi Greg, thanks for joining us today. I know you've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to hand over to you to share your fantastic insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and can you see my screen?
Yes, I can, sir. Looks great.
You can hear me. So thank you. Firstly, I'm obviously disappointed like you, Chris, not to be able to be doing this in person. I hope everyone is keeping well, has kept well the last months, and is also not yet zoomed out. So I'm going to try and do my best to give you some interesting insights throughout this presentation. My kids are being taken care of for the next half an hour, 40 minutes. Hopefully that will continue and they won't interrupt. But in terms of what I want to talk to you about, I think the title that Chris has suggested in terms of being one of the automotive's best kept secrets is a fair one, in a sense that there's a good chance that many of you listening today may have in their vehicle Mobileye technology. We're historically a tier 2 supplier, and you may have ADAS functionality that is powered by Mobileye. And I'll come on to that throughout the next 20 minutes, half an hour. I want to just touch on a couple of different areas. One is just to give you an overview about Mobileye. One, to talk about what our ADAS technology has been doing and how it working with across the automotive sector, how we're transitioning to data services and what that means for cities, transport authorities and others. And then towards the end, I'm just going to touch on what we're doing in the world of autonomous driving, how things are evolving towards that goal. What I want to try and get across as I'm speaking to you is that all the technology we're going to, all the solutions that we're providing are being powered by a single lens camera, and that's the primary sensor that we're using that supports our ADAS and eventually will support our AV autonomous vehicles. And this vision sensor is sensing and scanning the scene, and I'll give much more insight into what that means. But in terms of Mobileye, I'm not going to go through every milestone on their journey, but it was founded over 20 years ago. It spent 8 years doing R&D before Volvo was the first OEM to install the Mobileye chip. And you can see it's been a fairly meteoric rise since. They went public in 2014 in a 5.3 billion IPO, which at the time was the largest IPO of an Israeli company ever. And since that point, I'll jump very quickly to 2017, where Mobileye is now an Intel company, having been acquired for $15.3 billion. And that was and still is the largest acquisition of an Israeli company ever. The deal contributed 4% to Israel's GDP at the time, so quite significant. And I think Intel saw the success of Mobileye, and there's a real goal now to bring fully autonomous vehicle with the support of Intel. And in the last couple of years, I'm going to talk a lot about what we're doing around the intelligent mobility and smart cities area and the data, but also we're working towards fully autonomous vehicles in the next few years. We announced a robotaxi initiative 2 years ago, which is a joint venture with Volkswagen and Champion Motors, and that will be in Tel Aviv. So as I said when we kicked off, there's a good chance that your vehicle will have Mobileye technology in it. We are supplying over 25 of the leading OEMs. There's over 50 million Mobileye equipped vehicles. As an example, my Volvo has lane keep assist. It has automatic emergency braking. That is Mobileye technology. We also have a retrofit solution, and I'll talk through the differences between the OEM and retrofit. Chris, I think you're
for finding the jar there for being on mute. Sorry about that. I promise this is the only time I'll jump in until the Q&A at the end. I'm fascinated, and I think it'd be really useful for the audience. Israel, real high propensity of tech startups, but a real kind of lean towards mobility tech startups. Why is that?
I think that's you asked a very good question. I'm just going to jump to a couple of slides. I'll just take one step back to give a sort of an understanding, because I'm not sure if the audience will know, the startup scene more broadly in Israel. It actually has the largest number of startups per capita in the world. What you may know is a very small country, and at some point it's only 9 miles wide. So the sort of comparative landmass is Wales, perhaps. But it has the highest gross expenditure on R&D, which may go some way to answer your question.
Right.
Chris, has the largest amount of companies that are listed on NASDAQ outside the US. And I think the culture for not just mobility startups, but startups, they're a leader in cyber, in other technology areas. I think there's a real culture that it's okay to take the risk. Failure is not frowned upon. In fact, if anything, you take the learnings, you go to your next startup, you fail again perhaps, but then you go again. And I think that really is what drives, one of the reasons, it's probably a session in itself to explain why Israel is being called, the nickname Israel is the startup nation, and there's a whole host of other reasons, but that's sort of a 30-second summary of why Israel is such a hotbed for mobility. And you can see here some of the recent acquisitions. Obviously Mobileye stands out, but just during lockdown, Intel also acquired Move It, which is an on-demand transport planner for providing mobility as a service to individuals, helping you get from A to B through use of different transportation options. And no doubt there'll be more in the future. But the other reason...
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.
That's fine. Just to finish on that, just to give more of a broad understanding, you can see in the last 10 years how, and you'll recognize a lot of these brands, they've come to Israel. GM was the only one there 9 years ago, and since then, BMW, JLR, and many others have established either centers, partnerships, or other means to tap into that. And I think that only just plays to their strength. In terms of the number of startups, you can see mobility and autonomous connected vehicles has the lion's share. And just, you know, the way things are looking from 2014 onwards, it's increasing every year. It's almost doubled since that point, and it's probably going to continue. So that's just a little bit of a way of an aside from the presentation, but just to give more of a context. If I just jump back to our ADAS functionality, here you can see the four pillars is lane detection, vehicle detection, pedestrian detection, and blind spot detection. And again, you may be familiar with some of these features from your own vehicle, but you may what you may not know is that we also offer a retrofit solution. And the retrofit solution, where you cannot interfere with a braking system or a steering system, we have developed a retrofit solution that goes on the windscreen with a little iWatch, which gives you 5 life-saving features. And rather than the brakes being applied for you or the steering kicking in, you'll get audible alerts. And these features, and you'll see as I go through this presentation, how this looks in a vehicle, has pedestrian and cyclist collision warning, lane departure warning, headway monitoring warning, and forward collision warning. And these features are giving audible alerts, so it's giving you a series of beeps rather than keeping you in the lane. So again, back to my car, if I switch lane without indicating, the steering kicks in and pulls me back into the lane. In this system, same technology, the same chip, it'll give you an audible alert if you've not indicated when you're switching lane. And this has been a very successful system. We've installed this in over 1 million vehicles globally. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of case studies. The first is from the US because of the audience that I'm talking to. I thought it'd be interesting. You'll see the insurance rating upgrade as a result of the fleet that installed this. But closer to home, I'm just going to talk through two interesting case studies. One was with Universal Tires, which is a customer based in London in the southeast. They had a problem around claims classified as hit third party in the rear, and it was costing a lot of money. And there was some of the collisions were quite severe, which was obviously putting company drivers and other road users in danger. So they trialed and subsequently installed Mobileye retrofit solution, and you can see that here that it was a 50% drop in the average claims cost. And really what the feedback we got from the company is they recognise that this is a preventative tool working in real time and influencing driver behaviour who are on the job. Similarly, in London, we, through a very interesting cooperation with Abellio, which was funded initially by TfL, we trialled the system on some central London bus routes. Long story short, they were extremely impressed with the reduction in collisions that it was getting just even from the trial, that they have installed the retrofit solution across their entire London bus fleet. And it's been an excellent partnership, and it's interesting as well to hear, and it's something that I can resonate with as well, is that actually you're changing the driver behaviour, because actually you don't want these alerts, you don't want to be constantly being told that you're not driving well, and that changes your behaviour, and that is one of the additional benefits of the system. So that sort of summarises where we are on the ADAS offering, and really it's the bread and butter of Mobileye. And that will continue. We will continue to be a global leader in collision avoidance technology, but we are evolving into new areas. And that is around road asset mapping. Now, I just want to keep the fact that the ADAS is not going anywhere. This is an additional functionality built into the same system. So it's adding greater usage to the chip, to the system, the camera. So here you can see that this is what I talked about, the OEM, and this is our retrofit solution. And you'll see here that the iWatch which you recognize from a previous slide. So just to give you a little indication of what this means in practice, this video, hopefully, which is playing, we've taught the system to understand distances, recognize vehicles, pedestrian, cyclists, and detect potential dangers. But at the same time, we're using the same computer vision technology to understand the road infrastructure and detect road assets. And if I try and pause this, you can see it's got lampposts, it's got road markings, you may have seen road signs, it's picking up traffic lights as well. And that's doing that as the vehicle is driving around, while also giving you the ADAS collision avoidance technology as well. Just so how it works, and this is whether this is OEM or retrofit, it's very similar. We are the vehicle rather is scanning the road, as you just saw in the previous slide, identifying road assets. We are processing that, filtering the relevant information. That is then, as you would expect, fully anonymized, encrypted, and sent and being sent as data to the cloud, which we then turn into GIS layer. A GIS layer is a geographic information system, which is about visualizing, capturing, analyzing, and storing geographical data. And this is a fully automated process. This is calibrated data. So this is data for the same output from the same format. This is giving you high refresh rates. And it's also, this is a crowdsourcing offer in a sense, in that the more vehicles you have, the more data you'll get, the more up-to-date data you can have. And depending who it may be, whether it's a city or a transport operator, local authority, they can have the data that they need. They're not, we're not, it's not, they won't need every data layer. To give an example, this is a non-exhaustive list, and you can see, and you'll have seen from the previous video, some of the assets that we're identifying. There's a lot more as well that we're doing, but we are even identifying things such as manholes, which are not easy to do. A lot of our road asset survey work actually kicked off in a major partnership here with Ordnance Survey, who many of you know is our national mapping agency. And I've got a little video just to show you a test area we did in East London. So I'm just going to play that, and you'll see as well on the bottom of the screen the little iWatch. This is retrofitting the Mobileye system to an Ordnance Survey vehicle, which we're using for demonstration purposes, but it would be installed in any other vehicle as well. So I'm just going to play this for you. Okay, so there actually you can see the iWatch. There is the Mobileye system. So it's fairly self-explanatory. Hopefully that video worked as smoothly on your systems as it did on mine, but I'm happy to share some YouTube links where we've got more videos to demonstrate this. Excuse me. So we kicked this off, as I say, with Ordnance Survey, and our first commercial trial partner was Northumbrian Water Group. And you can see some of the challenges they have in terms of the expense and the labour expense as well to keep track of their assets. You can imagine what a water group, the assets that are important for them, be it manhole covers or drainage grates. But they need this relevant, up-to-date data to provide efficient operations. And as well as that, they also need to know if something's changed or something's damaged. So we worked with them, and it was very much the same way that you will have seen in a previous slide. We equipped their vehicles. So these are vehicles that are already on the road, going around a day-to-day business, going from A to B with the Mobileye system, providing, again, just to reiterate, the collision avoidance technology as well. And the field workers going around in their vans 12 hours a day are collecting assets, mapping the roads without any distraction. And again, as I showed you on the previous slide, the data is being processed. It's all encrypted. It's, as you would expect. We're not tracking people or drivers, and we're generating road asset data layers. And you can see here the sort of scale we've had in a 3-month period. And it's worth just pointing out that there's assets here that are not going to be relevant to a utility, be it something like road markings, but that may be valuable to a local authority. The local authority equally won't necessarily be interested in manholes. So what, as I said earlier, what we're trying to do is to deliver a crowdsourcing solution here, so that the more units that are on the road, the better the data for all those involved. And we're in Northumbrian Water Group in the northeast of England. We're seeing that. We've got other partners who are coming on board. Who've come on board who recognise the value of this proposition. So again, just some high level numbers in terms of the number of assets that we've identified and the features observed over a very short period. I thought this visual was actually quite neat to show how it's detecting the road assets, the road geometry, and then translating it into a map. So I'm just going to play this for a few seconds. So here on the left-hand side, that is what the vehicle you saw in the previous video was doing, and that's how it looks going onto a map. You can see the end result matches with the reality. Okay, so just so really, to recap where we've got to. I've talked about the ADAS technology. I've talked about the asset surveying, but also what we're able to deliver for cities and others is help them achieve their objectives around smart cities, which is a little bit of a buzzword, but is also, I think, is where many are going as they look to improve journeys, reduce congestion, reduce and all the other challenges with public transportation. So a couple of slides here just to show how we can overlay data about infrastructure and movement in the city, and these insights can be gained to help support road safety and also preparing for self-driving cars in the future. So there's dynamic data that we're able to provide for local governments to improve mobility and help them plan with evidence on improvements to their city. And I'm going to go through a few slides that shows how we aggregate mobility data using, again, the Mobileye system, so aggregating data on near misses, speed, harsh braking, harsh cornering, pedestrian and cyclist volume, and we are able actually to create a road risk score from that, which obviously helps to identify dangerous intersections and road segments in a city. So here is just I'm going to go through a few visuals that show how we use this data to help a city identify a hotspot. You can see here, I don't know how clearly you can see on the right hand side, the average speed is determined by a different color, and how the more severe the color here is the density or sparseness of pedestrians. Another example here, you can see that the road section has extremely high rate of near misses, harsh cornering, harsh braking, and what that means is a city might need to change its sign, look at the signage that they've got, change the signage. We're providing these insights, taking as I say, compiling a road risk score from, be it from harsh braking, cornering, and so on. I won't list every feature. Again, we can also provide speeds on the road, and this is just an example, again, in New York, between two locations, and it's color coded depending on the speed. And again, going with Barcelona, we're doing road asset surveying as well, and that's how it looks. You can see along here you've got traffic signs in yellow, traffic lights red, and road markings and poles. Again, we're helping, as I say, to empower a local authority to take action. There is a this particular junction, for some reason, has been identified as having a high road risk score, and it's the idea is that cities will use these insights to improve their road safety. We can also help a city in terms of urban planning infrastructure improvements by superimposing multiple data sets on movement and road infrastructure. So here we can combine a GIS layer of cyclist volumes and bike lanes and overlay the data. And then we can actually determine how heavily, or not perhaps as might be the case, is a bike lane being utilised. We also can break this data down into time. So time of day, day of the week. Now, obviously, between 6 and 9, 6 and 12 in the morning, there's going to be more movement than at 2 till 4 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's about, again, giving this data to cities, public transport operators, and others to better understand and plan, to be honest, as they embark on their smart cities. So just to summarise, we're helping here not just with cities but fleets as well, because we've got collision avoidance, and we're helping to improve driver performance, but we're also overall improving road safety for the city. We're helping, as I say, to quantify the risk and encourage cities to take action. One additional offering that we are now doing in terms of the road, and you'll see that as a pothole which are ubiquitous around the country, is that we're able to identify road condition, and we're able to identify if there's potholes. And again, like with the other GIS layers that I've talked about, we can send that information to cities, to operators, to different for other companies who may have particular use cases around that. So here you can see, and I've got a little video to show. If I just press it, you can see where the cracks in the road are, which is identified by the purple markings. And again, I sound like a scratch record, but I just want to explain this is through the same system, detecting the road condition whilst you're getting your collision avoidance. And that is then, as you would expect, is put onto, as you saw in the previous slides, providing a road condition score. You can see where the most severe road condition, so the most cracks in that intersection, for example. So I've touched on our ADAS offering. I've touched on the data services, and I mentioned that we are, really powering forward on autonomous vehicle technology, and that's really how I want to finish with the time that I have. It's a real ambition of the company, and they are making some serious headway to get to where they want to be. The evolution in terms of how to get there, I mentioned at the very start when I was talking about Mobilize roadmap and where they've got to is about robo-taxis. So this is about on-demand taxis, with driverless taxis, which they're trialing with VW and Champion Motors, and launching that in a couple of years, within 2 years in Tel Aviv. And the ambition is to have autonomous vehicles on the road by 2025. And I'm just going to show you a short video, which hopefully will come up. If I may have to, hang on a second. No, hang on, I've lost it. So I'm just going to, let me see 1 second.
Next, we encounter a multi-lane roundabout with a lot of traffic and a lot of complexities. It's hard to navigate even for a human driver.
I don't know if you're seeing my screen or not. Chris, can you just?
Sure, Greg.
You can see the video?
Yes.
Okay, I'll play it from the beginning. It's just 2 minutes.
Next, we encounter a multi-lane roundabout with a lot of traffic and a lot of complexities. It's hard to navigate even for a human driver. You can see that we are driving in the inner lane because we want to take the third exit. As we approach our exit, a vehicle in the outer lane enters, intending to continue straight. You can see how the AV firmly and safely pushes its way out of the roundabout and even yielding to a pedestrian. Here you can see how smoothly we are navigating this narrow street. And don't forget, we're using only cameras. No radar, no LiDAR. Here you can see this double parked vehicle up ahead that we will need to navigate around. You can see that even the human drivers ahead of us are struggling to navigate this one. Then the driver gets out of his car to signal us to go around him. You can also see in the sensing display how we detect the driver and the open door. Once he gets back in to give us more space to pass, the AV is able to continue. Before, it was just a bit too narrow. This is a demonstration of how effective and robust our short-range sensing is. Again, only cameras.
So that, I hope just because that was a video we just released very, let me just stop that. We released just a couple of weeks ago, and you know, the technology is evolving. But again, just the point I want to try and get through this whole session was that this is a camera-based system. So on that note, rather than trying to get back to my slides, I will conclude there. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Fascinating. My mind runs away with me in terms of the amount of opportunities, not just within insurance, but as you say, you know, road infrastructure, the cost of potholes, the ability to layer those kind of black spots onto mapping data, onto road condition data. Hugely valuable for the insurance sector and, you know, the wider economy. You know, the prospect of our vehicles contributing to informing, you know, the infrastructure services that, you know, there's a problem is fascinating. It's a huge step on from the sort of TomTom and sat-nav where you can report roadkill on the motorway as you're driving along the ways kind of thing. It really is a future look. I've got some great questions, but I'm just going to kick off with one of my own first. We've been talking this week, as you can imagine, a lot about the impact of COVID-19, not just on us as an industry, but on consumer sentiment, consumer behaviour, attitudes towards vehicle ownership, vehicle usage, public transportation, etc. Do you think coronavirus has, and the potential recession that we're facing, will impact the progress of automated mobility? And I mean specifically here that kind of fully autonomous robo-taxi type vision.
It's a fair question. If I take the mobility in its wider context first, I think without sounding cliche, there's challenges and opportunities. On that one hand, Intel acquired Move It over the course of lockdown. In the UK, at a micromobility level, we saw DFT rush out a consultation, which had been in the pipeline, but I think COVID accelerated it on e-scooters. And I think that our way of commuting, our way of working has changed short term, may continue in the long term, and I think that things will need to change to adapt to that. On automated mobility, there was an announcement a couple of weeks ago where BMW and Daimler decided to pause development of their autonomous technology, focus on existing partnerships, one is which is actually with Mobileye. And our founder and CEO said recently he sees great consolidation in the industry, not necessarily entirely related to COVID, but he said the strategy of having individual companies each focusing on one component, like safety, sensors or maps, is not sustainable because it's an end-to-end system that cannot be broken down. So I think things will keep going. They'll move forward. This is I think everyone realizes that it's a matter of when, not if. Perhaps things will slow down. OEMs have to reconsider their priorities, but I think you will still be there. We're still moving forward, as far as I can tell.
That makes perfect sense to me, Greg. I've got a couple of technical questions, and as we've said to the audience, we'll follow up on all of these if we don't get through them or you're not in a position to answer. First one I got was, where are my Q&A panel? From Andy Watson. Is this system plug and play, or does it need calibration? So I think we're talking specifically about the retrofit system there.
Yeah. So the retrofit system requires installation to calibrate it. It takes somewhere in the region of an hour and a half per vehicle, but it can be retrofitted to almost any vehicle type. I've shown you buses and vans, but all sorts of vehicles. But it's not plug and play. It does need, and we have our own technical team in the UK who travel around to manage these installations.
And similarly, if the vehicle is involved in an incident, a bump, etc., just like all ADAS equipment that we're finding in the vehicle repair process, it would need a recalibration after an incident as well, just like ordinary.
Yeah. And if it's a lease vehicle, we'd come and remove it before it goes back to the lease company.
Makes sense. Great question, which I think is a very commonly reported kind of, I wouldn't say myth, but factor around this sort of technology. How effective is the system in inclement weather? Heavy rain, fog?
So we have what we term smart ADAS, which is factoring in weather. So if the weather 3 miles down the road is, if it's raining, then the system and over-the-air updates can almost change the settings. So it might want to give you change the settings on forward collision warning, so that you've got a further, or headway monitoring. So you might want to have a further distance apart from the vehicle in front if the weather conditions are adverse. So it is effective in those conditions. Fog, yes, it will be. It depends how heavy fog. It's only going to. You can't see yourself in heavy fog.
Our own eyes aren't very good in heavy fog, are they?
Yeah, exactly. But generally, it can factor in the weather.
I think the weather's a really interesting thing. We've got a great question from Abigail Jackson. Tech seems like it's covering a lot of elements around infrastructure already and assets. What other assets are you looking to be able to report on? I mean, if you think about a vehicle driving around, you touched on the weather there. There is no better real-time way of capturing the weather and feeding it back and then playing it back out to the car network, to the AI, than vehicles moving around the UK.
Abigail's question just reminds me of you will have seen in some of the slides that we detect manhole covers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an asset that we initially detected. We were told, we were working with trial partners. They said to us, "Oh, these are really important. We need to know where they are if they're damaged." And we trained the system to identify manhole covers. And similarly, when I show you what we're doing on pothole detection, this has not all just come at once. This has evolved over time. But we're working around the world on helping to detect potholes. But this is the system needs to be trained, and there'll be other assets that we maybe we are picking up, or maybe we aren't yet. But we can train the system to identify them.
So do speed camera detection, Greg?
If it's about speed cameras as a camera on a pole, as it were, at the side of the road, I will need to get back to be conclusive on that one. I'm not 100% sure. It would certainly it certainly gives you speed limit indicators. So where there's a road sign with a speed on it, it will detect that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it's given.
A lot of others have done speed camera detection, but largely through people dropping a pin when they go past one. So I think that is a great question.
My hunch that we do, but I need to just double check.
Sure. Quite a few questions around data ownership. I would imagine this is a minefield. Do you have a kind of high level? Because you can't just even look at the I own a Volvo that's got Mobileye technology in it. What's that scenario? From personal experience, I know that gets more complex when we look at it's owned by a fleet, lent to an employee, lent to a renter. There are multiple chains in this data ownership piece, but just give us a high level view on that, Greg.
So a couple of things just to reiterate. One is GDPR compliance, as you would expect. Another is, as you saw in one of my slides, in terms of being anonymized and encrypted. And even we're not, even when we're working with fleets, we're not picking up the beginning of the journey or the end of the journey. It's totally, we're not tracking anyone. We're not interested in tracking. That's not the business we're in. The data is owned by Mobileye. When we're talking on the retrofit system, I'm not at liberty to talk about the arrangements with OEMs.
Sure.
But it's sort of in the same way that you have a mobile phone and there'll be apps collecting data that they own. You're not, and that's sort of as comparative as I can provide in terms of how the data is, how the data is owned. If that answers the question as high level as possible.
Makes sense, and I figured that would be the case. Some interesting questions around, let's call it non-cities and temporary road furniture. So Zoe Hansen is asking, how well do the retrofit systems cope with lane marking changes when there are roadworks, such as a temporarily narrowed lane during motorway works? We've all been there where we throw the cones out and the motorway goes from 4 down to 2 in front of your very eyes. It would
detect it. It would detect that the lanes, not all lane markings are the same. Right. Be it on an A road, B road, motorway. So it will be able to detect that if you're in a narrower lane. That's on the ADAS side of things. As an asset, it also can detect roadworks. So it can detect if there's a construction zone, and also one use case might be a local authority that issues permits for a construction zone. That construction company may have overstayed its welcome, and rather than sending out someone, it can just send an alert back to say, well, the construction area is still there.
And I guess that's the thing that I think the big message that came across in that final video is this is all about cameras. So it's replacing human eye. That's where you started the presentation. So if I kind of just try and think through Zoe's question there, what we're saying is it's not making decisions based on what it thinks is there, having mapped it before. That's almost a different segment, isn't it?
Yeah.
What we're saying is it can see the lanes get narrower. It can see there is something in the road in front, and therefore it will provide the lane. What did you call the lane detection?
The lane detection. The lane detection. Yeah.
Just in a smaller lane. Last question I'm going to take from. I've had a few great questions from John. John, he's clearly a real techie. Let's see if we can rattle through a couple of these before we wrap up. Do you use any AI chips in your hardware, or does your hardware rely on cloud technology? As you're doing this live, I assume you've embedded the AI into the hardware.
Yeah, it's using our chip, the IQ4 chip that is which is in the unit, as well as a SIM card to upload the data.
I reckon I've just worked out which John this is actually asking questions like that. I'm going to assume it's Mr. Valentine. Have you tested your AI in areas other than cities? So B roads in Cornwall with no lane markings.
Yeah, I mean we're driving the vehicle wherever the vehicle is. We're not in control of where the vehicle's going. So yes, we're.
Different value in a city, I guess, that smart city versus the more rural.
But the interesting point there is that the rural areas won't be driven as much, but they'll also have assets, and these assets also still need to be mapped. And these assets may, if the roadworks, if the construction company turns up and digs up the road, then it'll have to, you'd still have to have the area remapped. So yeah, of course, that the city centres are where the comparative, where the more populated, but also there is rural areas which are equally important, and they'll also have other use cases as well.
Mm-hmm. And last question from me: this isn't about insurance. This clearly isn't telematics. It looks like you could do telematics quite easily. What's your approach to telematics user-based insurance? Just quickly before we finish off, Greg.
Well, hopefully the audience might have seen some potential use cases for insurance. Telematics provide an important service. We don't do telematics per se, but we do integrate with telematic providers. And we're complementing what they do. The fact that we're able to integrate, say, with almost any telematics provider. There will be fleets who have their own systems, but they're not getting the benefits they would get unless they install Mobileye. So it's for us, it's not necessarily one or the other. It's about working together if we have to, if we need to, and preventing accidents from happening in the first place.
Fantastic. Greg, thank you for that glimpse into the future. The reaction from the panel, the number of questions we've got, I'm sure everybody found that as fascinating, thought-provoking and insightful as I did. Thank you so much for giving up your valuable time. I know you're an incredibly busy guy, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, and to everyone for watching.
You're welcome. There'll be people in rapturous applause at this moment, Greg.
I'm sure. A standing ovation, no less.
Trust me. So, final thank you for today to you, our audience, our corporate partners. I look forward to seeing you for one last bit of fun and enlightenment tomorrow with Stuart Baldwin. And take care and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you very much.